On the night of November 24th to 25th, 2025, a quiet stretch of the southern Russian sky suddenly turned into the scene of one of the war's most unexpected operations. Dozens of alarms lit up across multiple command posts as Ukraine sent a coordinated strike deep into territory long believed to be beyond its reach. Russian officials quickly announced that hundreds of incoming drones had been shot down, but early images from the ground told a different story. Fires burned across several sites once considered safe, and confusion spread through regional air defense networks that had never faced pressure on this scale. What happened in those hours now raises a far larger question, one that leads us directly into the heart of this analysis. Ukraine moved toward this operation because conditions on the ground, in the air, and across the Black Sea changed during late 2025, creating a rare window for a long-range strike. Kyiv had spent months increasing domestic drone production and modifying its R-360 Neptune missile for ground attacks, a development noted by the Institute for the Study of War. As these new systems entered service, Ukraine gained the ability to reach targets hundreds of kilometers inside Russian territory without relying on Western weapons. Meanwhile, Russia believed its distance from the front line, combined with layers of S-300, S-400, and Panzer defenses, would stop any deep attack. This assumption set the stage for what happened on the night of November 24th to 25th. Winter also shaped Ukraine's timing. Night temperatures dropped, providing clearer air for low-altitude flight and reducing infrared detection ranges for Russian sensors, a detail highlighted by several military analysts interviewed by BBC Defense in October 2025. Fog and heavy cloud cover along the coast allowed Ukrainian launch crews to move equipment without drawing satellite attention. Taken together, these conditions produced a rare opportunity for a coordinated strike across several regions at once. Tagenrog became the central target because it is the heart of Russia's strategic aviation support network. The Beriev Tanke plant maintains Tu-95MS bombers, Tu-142 maritime aircraft, and the radar platforms A-50 and A-100. These aircraft shape Moscow's long-range surveillance and nuclear deterrence posture, according to a January 2024 report from CSIS on Russia's Air Force structure. The city also hosts one of Russia's most protected research assets, the A-60 Airborne Laser Lab, a unique testbed for high-energy weapon programs dating back to the Soviet era. Because only two A-60 airframes exist, any damage to one of them would have immediate and long-lasting effects. When the strike ended, satellite images from Maxar and NASA, firms' fire detection data, confirmed large fires inside the Tagenrog aviation complex. Several hangars showed clear burn marks, collapsed roofing, and heat signatures indicating intense fuel-fed fires. Although independent assessments avoided early conclusions about the full scale of destruction, the evidence showed that key parts of the compound had been hit. Novorossiysk and Tuapse were added to the target list because both cities support Russia's war economy in different but connected ways. Novorossiysk protects Black Sea shipping routes and houses one of the region's most capable S-400 units. The port exports some of Russia's most valuable crude flows, accounting for nearly 2 million barrels per day through its wider network, according to Reuters shipping reports from mid-2025. Disrupting this area even briefly could unsettle Russia's export schedule and force the military to divert air defense assets away from other regions. Tuapse plays a different role. Its refinery processes crude for both civilian markets and military fuel corridors stretching toward the southern districts. Fires at this location have occurred during earlier drone attacks, and each incident has caused temporary reductions in output, as documented in BBC coverage of refinery strikes during 2023 and 2024. By choosing Tuapse again, Ukraine targeted a facility already known to be difficult for Russia to protect, especially when unmanned aircraft approach from offshore at low altitude. Together, Tagenrog, Novorossiysk, and Tuapse form a triangle of aviation, air defense, and energy assets that sustain Russia's operations across the southern front. Striking all three in one night was not simply about destruction. It was about overwhelming Russian radar screens, spreading confusion through command posts, and forcing air defense crews to guess which targets posed the greatest danger. Russian operators faced a crowded radar picture as dozens of slow drones moved across different sectors, while faster systems remained hidden until the final moments. By dividing Russian attention, Ukraine increased the chance that its most important weapons would reach high-value objectives. This broader strategy becomes clearer once we examine how Ukraine executed the most important part of the mission, the deep strike on Tagenrog. The strike on Tagenrog began with a simple idea: overwhelm Russian radar screens before any real danger arrived. Ukrainian crews launched a large group of slow propeller drones toward the city shortly after 1 a.m., and this swarm filled the sky with hundreds of small signals. These unmanned aircraft were cheap and easy to produce, but their value came from the confusion they created. Russian operators saw a crowded radar picture and faced dozens of moving dots, which made it difficult to decide which tracks were important. Several air defense crews fired almost non-stop at these decoys, a detail later discussed by analysts from the Institute for the Study of War. This opening wave forced Russia to spend ammunition and attention on threats that had no real strike capability. The real weapons appeared minutes later. While the slow drones kept Russian radars busy, modified R-360 Neptune missiles approached Tagenrog at extremely low altitude, moving just above the water at 10 to 30 meters. Their sea-skimming flight path hid them behind the curve of the Earth until they were very close to the shoreline, a technique described in a BBC Defense report on cruise missile tactics from 2024. Alongside these missiles, a second group of jet-powered BARS UAVs advanced at higher speed. Their compact size and rapid movement allowed them to blend into radar clutter created by the earlier swarm. Satellite-based open-source intelligence, OSINT, picked up heat signatures consistent with this mixed approach, confirming low-level trajectories that matched Ukrainian tactics seen in earlier operations. The first interception happened near the city's outer perimeter. A Russian Tor M2 system managed to shoot down one Neptune missile, but the remaining missiles and BARS UAVs continued toward their targets. At this point, Russian S-300, S-400, and Panzer batteries were still focused on the swarm of slow drones that filled most of their screens. According to Reuters, several air defense units responded to the wrong threats because their systems had already switched into high-rate engagement mode and were tracking dozens of decoys at once. This misalignment gave Ukraine a short but critical opening that allowed the main strike group to pass through the defensive line. The first major impact occurred inside the Airfield aviation complex. One Neptune missile detonated above a Tu-95 MS bomber that was undergoing maintenance inside a large hangar. The explosion caused part of the structure to collapse and sent debris across the surrounding area. Satellite images released by Maxar showed burn marks on the roof and sections of the building that had caved in, confirming widespread damage. Additional shock waves affected other workshops where two 142 maritime aircraft were serviced. These aircraft are crucial for long-range patrol, and any disruption to their support facilities carries long-term consequences. The next loss proved even more serious. Another strike hit the A-60 laser aircraft, a rare platform used for Russia's airborne anti-satellite research program. Photos reviewed by BBC Verify showed the fuselage covered in flames, and later images suggested that the aircraft had burned beyond repair. This damage matters because only two A-60 airframes exist, and the program requires extensive electronics, optics, and power systems that cannot be replaced easily under sanctions. Analysts from CSIS noted that the loss of this aircraft may hinder Russia's ability to test high-energy weapons for years. Close to the A-60 site, an Il-76 airframe connected to the A-100LL radar prototype program also suffered damage from shrapnel and secondary fires. The A-100 series is Russia's next-generation airborne early warning system meant to replace the aging A-50 fleet. Experts from the Royal United Services Institute estimated that any serious damage to these prototypes could delay the program by almost a decade because many components are imported and restricted under wartime sanctions. The strike also affected facilities linked to UAV production. Fires were reported at the Atlant and Monia complexes, which support drone assembly and testing. While early claims suggested total destruction, data from NASA's FIRMS fire detection system showed multiple intense hotspots but did not confirm a complete loss of infrastructure. Even partial damage, however, reduces Russia's ability to produce reconnaissance drones, which are already limited by shortages of foreign-made electronics. While Tagenrog absorbed the heaviest strategic losses, the strike on Novorossiysk revealed a different vulnerability: the collapse of a major air defense sector. Novorossiysk became the second focus of the operation because it protects some of Russia's most important Black Sea energy exports and hosts advanced S-400 units that guard the wider region. This port handles large volumes of crude and refined products each year, and Reuters has described it as one of Moscow's most active maritime links to global markets. Reuters, July 2025. Since many pipelines and shipping routes depend on this location, even a brief disruption can affect Russia's commercial and military schedules. The presence of elite air defense crews in the hills around the bay shows how vital this port is to Russian planners, who view it as a shield for both infrastructure and naval activity. The first signs of trouble appeared shortly after the Tagenrog strike began, when a separate wave of drones moved toward Novorossiysk. Russian officials quickly released statements saying all incoming UAVs had been intercepted, and these early claims circulated widely across state media. Minutes later, however, civilian videos started to appear on regional telegram channels. These clips showed flashes above the shoreline and fires near several industrial points, which contradicted the government's message. OSINT researchers reviewed the footage and compared it with NASA FIRMS fire detections from that night, identifying heat signatures consistent with explosions inside the port zone. This evidence indicated that at least some of the drones had reached their targets. The most serious damage involved an S-400 launcher assigned to defend the coastal district. Ukrainian sources reported that a Bars jet-powered UAV dove directly into the launcher during the chaos created by the decoy swarm. Although official Russian channels denied this report, satellite imagery reviewed by Maxar showed a burned patch of ground with debris patterns typical of an ammunition cook-off, where stored missiles ignite after being struck. The destruction of a launcher is significant because these systems form the backbone of Russia's regional air defense plan, and each launcher is expensive, difficult to replace under sanctions, and critical for creating overlapping coverage around the port. Soon after the launcher incident, additional explosions lit up the area near the Sheskery's oil terminal. This facility processes large quantities of crude shipped through the Caspian Pipeline Consortium, making it one of the busiest terminals on the Black Sea. Fires were visible from across the bay, and local residents recorded thick smoke rising from fuel handling equipment. International outlets, including BBC News, confirmed that operations at the terminal were briefly disrupted due to the attack, and tugboats were sent to prevent the flames from spreading. While the full extent of the damage remained unclear during the first day, even short interruptions can create delays for tankers waiting offshore, which in turn affects revenue flows and shipping schedules. Taken together, these events revealed several weaknesses in Novorossiysk's defenses. The port is protected by multiple layers of radars and interceptors, yet the large number of drones forced crews to split their attention between different directions. As analysts at the Royal United Services Institute, RUSI, have explained in earlier studies, air defense systems struggle when they must track numerous slow targets and identify which ones are real threats. RUSI, 2024. In this case, the decoy drones created a crowded radar picture, and the high-speed bar's UAV took advantage of that confusion. The result was a breach in a location that Russia once described as one of its safest Black Sea strongholds. The operational meaning of this strike is clear. Even heavily protected port regions can be reached if attackers combine saturation tactics with fast, low-signature systems. Ukraine demonstrated that complex infrastructure, including oil terminals and naval facilities, cannot rely solely on advanced missile systems to stay secure. Once the early swarm disrupted the defenders' focus, the following waves exploited the gaps and forced Russia to respond to multiple problems at the same time. The operation's southern axis did not stop there. As Novorossiysk reeled, another wave moved toward Tuapse, one of Russia's key refining hubs. Tuapse entered the operation because its refinery supplies major pipeline routes and supports military districts across southern Russia, making it one of the country's most important energy hubs. According to Reuters' coverage of Black Sea refinery output in mid-2025, Tuapse handles thousands of tons of crude and refined products each day, much of it moving toward bases in the Rostov and Krasnodar regions. This refinery also feeds critical fuel corridors that help sustain Russia's wider war effort. Any disruption, even for a short period, can push logistical networks to their limits, especially when frontline units rely on steady deliveries of diesel, aviation fuel, and lubricants. The drone wave that moved toward Tuapse did so shortly after the strike on Novorossiysk, following a low-altitude route across the Black Sea. Ukrainian planners used the same technique seen earlier in the night. Keep unmanned aircraft close to the surface, where radar performance weakens due to reflections from the water. BBC defense analysts have explained that drones flying near wave height often appear only briefly on radar screens, giving defenders little time to react. This made Tuapse vulnerable as the drones passed through a narrow corridor between coastal ridges and the refinery's outer storage zones, arriving quickly before local units could adjust. The first impacts were reported near 2:30 a.m., when explosions tore through several storage areas on the refinery's western side. Fires broke out around pipeline junctions and tank clusters, and videos posted by residents showed flames rising above nearby hills. NASA firm satellite data confirmed multiple heat spots inside the complex in the hours after the strike, matching eyewitness recordings. Local emergency crews worked to contain the fire lines, but officials gave no clear statement about the full scale of the damage until later in the day. This created uncertainty for shipping companies waiting offshore, since operations at the port often depend on steady output from the Tuapse facility. This attack is part of a longer campaign that Ukraine has carried out since 2023, targeting Russian oil infrastructure to reduce the financial resources available for war. Earlier strikes on refineries in Krasnodar, Ryazan, and Belgorod disrupted throughput for days, and each incident forced operators to divert supplies to other locations. Analysts at CSIS noted in a 2024 report that persistent pressure on energy facilities increases internal costs for Russia and forces the military to stretch its supply chain across greater distances. Tuapse's position on the Black Sea makes it both valuable and vulnerable. Long-range drones can reach it without crossing large stretches of defended airspace. The economic impact of this particular attack appears modest but meaningful. Short-term fires decreased refining capacity, and ships scheduled to load products faced delays while crews assessed the situation. Even if production returns quickly, the operational rhythm of the refinery was shaken, and Russia must now allocate additional resources to protect the site. These adjustments increase internal pressure on logistics systems already strained by months of conflict. Every hour that a refinery sits idle creates ripple effects. Fuel deliveries slow, distribution centers wait longer, and units further inland receive supplies later than planned. The military effect is also notable. Refineries like Tuapse help maintain fuel reserves for aircraft, armored vehicles, and naval patrols. While Russia has multiple supply routes, losing part of Tuapse's output forces redistribution across other corridors, many of which are already operating at maximum capacity. In wartime, even small losses can create cumulative stress, especially when Ukraine continues to strike other facilities across the region. Together, these points show why Tuapse was included in the operation. It stands at the intersection of economic power and military readiness. The refinery may not draw the same attention as a bomber hangar or an S-400 site, but its role in feeding Russia's war machine makes it a strategic target. By attacking it on the same night as Tagenrog and Novorossiysk, Ukraine increased the overall pressure on Russia's southern infrastructure and forced commanders to divide their attention across several fronts. Taken together, these coordinated strikes expose a deeper shift in modern warfare: the power of inexpensive drones to neutralize billion-dollar defense systems. The success of Ukraine's operation becomes clearer when we look at how saturation tactics broke down Russia's air defense network. This doctrine relies on sending large numbers of cheap drones into defended airspace, so the defending side spends time, missiles, and attention on targets that pose limited danger. Analysts at the Royal United Services Institute, RUSI 2024, have explained that many missile systems struggle when forced to track dozens of slow objects at once, and this is exactly what happened across Russia's southern coast during the November attacks. Air defense units burned interceptor stocks while trying to engage the first wave, and every shot fired at a decoy made it harder to counter the real strike weapons that followed. This saturation also damaged situational awareness. When operators face crowded screens, they must make quick choices about which tracks matter most. During the Tagenrog and Novorossiysk strikes, the radar picture filled with small signals that looked similar because the drones flew at different speeds and altitudes. BBC defense analysts noted that air defense crews often lose track of fast-moving threats when slower aircraft dominate their displays. BBC 2024. In those moments, key decisions become harder, and the chance of missing a real danger increases. This pressure produced cognitive overload inside Russian command posts. Officers had to classify too many tracks and respond to alerts from several directions at the same time. A Reuters report published after the attack described how crews in Rostov and Krasnodar struggled to identify priority targets because the system listed dozens of incoming objects. This confusion led to misallocation of interceptors, as many missiles were fired at drones with little striking power, while the most dangerous weapons were still approaching. The modified Neptune missiles used in the operation took full advantage of this situation. These land attack versions flew at low altitude and used terrain masking to stay hidden until they were close to their targets. According to CSIS studies on cruise missile behavior, weapons flying below 30 meters remain out of radar range much longer because they blend into background noise from hills, trees, and sea waves. This means defenders have only seconds to detect and react once the missile peaks above surface level. During the November strike, these short detection windows gave Russian crews no time to recover from earlier confusion, allowing several missiles to enter Tagenrog with little resistance. The Bar's jet-powered UAVs played a different but equally important role. Their small radar signature made them difficult to track, and their speed allowed them to reach defended sites quickly. OSINT analysts who reviewed Maxar satellite data from that night observed patterns consistent with fast-moving drones turning sharply toward air defense positions. Maxar, November 26, 2025. These movements suggest that Bar's units were used to strike radars and launchers, weakening the defensive line just before the Neptune missiles arrived. This combination of deception, speed, and low visibility helped Ukraine break through systems designed to stop much larger threats. Russia's layered defenses failed because they were overwhelmed from several directions at once. The S-300, S-400, and Pantsir units were built to handle isolated threats, yet they struggled when faced with a mix of slow drones and high-speed UAVs. RUSI analysts emphasize that even advanced radar systems have physical limits on how many targets they can process at the same time. Poor coordination between units and heavy reliance on automated threat ranking systems made these limits more serious, especially when fast-moving aircraft appeared behind a crowded radar field. These technical failures set the stage for a final question. What does this operation mean for the wider balance of power? Ukraine's strikes on November 24th and 25th showed how modern warfare now favors systems that are fast, flexible, and cheap, especially when used with precise timing. By hitting Tagenrog first, then Novorossiysk, and finally Tuapse in one coordinated night, Kyiv exposed major gaps in Russia's aviation support network and energy corridor. Satellite images from Maxar confirmed fires across multiple sites, while BBC Verify reported the loss of the rare A-60 laser aircraft, a setback that weakens Moscow's long-term space warfare plans. CSIS also noted that delays to the A-100LL radar program will limit Russia's ability to track distant targets for years. Together, these events mark a turning point, showing how small unmanned systems can break through expensive defenses and challenge traditional power on a global stage. If you want more clear, direct analysis like this, remember to subscribe to Military Force for future reports.